The laugh came first. Sharp, loud, designed to carry. It bounced off the fresh asphalt and echoed between the townhomes like a punchline. Everyone was expected to enjoy. "Sir," the woman said, voice raised on purpose, "you can't park that thing here." I turned slowly, already knowing who she was before she finished the sentence. "Linda Whitmore, HOA president. Brookstone Ridge." She stood near the center of the parking lot like she owned gravity itself, cream blazer, oversized sunglasses, posture straight out of a leadership seminar that teaches confidence without competence. Two men flanked her. One was older, polished, smiling thinly, Gerald Pike, HOA legal counsel. The other leaned against a black Range Rover with his arms crossed, eyes cold and assessing, Marcus Bell, developer. Three of them. One of me. My old pickup truck sat crooked in a visitor spot, paint faded, tailgate dented. A quiet reminder that life doesn't always give you time to recover before it keeps moving. Linda took a step closer, scanning me from boots to collar like she was calculating my worth. "This is private HOA property," she said loudly. "Residents only, you don't look like a resident." A couple unloading groceries slowed down. A landscaper pretended to adjust his trimmer. Someone lifted a phone. Public humiliation, clean, efficient, intentional. "I'm just here for a minute," I said evenly. "I'll move." She laughed again. Gerald smirked. Marcus said nothing, just watched. "No, you won't," Linda replied. "You've already violated HOA policy, unauthorized commercial vehicle. If you don't move right now, I'm calling for a tow." Tow? The word hit harder than it should have. Because the last time my truck got towed, I stood in a hospital hallway holding a clipboard, deciding whether to pay the impound fee or refill my wife's prescription. My wife, Alina, was at home right now. Weak, pale, hooked to a dialysis schedule that ruled our lives. Every delay, every dollar, every ounce of stress mattered more than these people could ever imagine. And here they were, threatening my livelihood for sport. I looked around the lot. Fresh asphalt, bright white paint lines, new LED lights, storm drains cut clean and deep. My eyes followed the slope. Wrong grade. The drains funneled water toward the wetlands instead of away from them. I noticed it instantly, not because I was special, but because this was what I'd spent half my life doing. I exhaled slowly. "I'll go," I said. Linda blinked. She'd expected resistance, anger begging something she could dominate. "That's what I thought," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "And don't come back." I nodded, got into my truck, and drove out of the lot under the weight of a dozen eyes. I didn't go far. I parked across the street, cut the engine, and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, watching them disperse like the show was over. 5 years. That's how long it had been since I'd last walked this land. 5 years since I'd stood here with survey stakes, paperwork, and a future that hadn't collapsed yet. They had no idea who I was. They saw a working-class guy in a beat-up truck and decided that was the whole story. They didn't know that before life knocked me flat, I was a licensed civil engineer, former Army Corps, specializing in drainage systems, land use compliance, and municipal infrastructure. They didn't know I'd designed stormwater mitigation, projects larger than their entire neighborhood. They didn't know I read deeds the way other people read text messages. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out a folded document, edges worn soft from years of being carried more for memory than use. The deed. My name still printed clean across the top. The parcel description matched the parking lot exactly. And suddenly, something clicked into place. They hadn't just built without permission. They built fast. Fast enough to hide something. I watched as a maintenance truck rolled in through the rear entrance. No markings, no HOA logo. It stopped near the far fence, right where the storm drain disappeared into the ground. Not city equipment. Not registered. I took a photo. Linda thought she'd won a moment. What she'd actually done was remind me of something I'd forgotten in the years of hospital rooms and exhaustion. I was still good at this. And this time, I wasn't fighting for pride. I was fighting for Alina. For the families downstream who didn't know why their water tasted wrong. For the piece of land they thought no one would ever come back for. As I watched the sun reflect off the asphalt they'd laid on my property, I made myself one quiet promise. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't argue. I would let them keep laughing. Because the deeper they dug in, the harder it was going to be to climb out. 5 years earlier, my world had been reduced to a single hallway. 4th floor, fluorescent lights, beige walls that never slept. I learned how to read lab results before I slept. I learned which nurses meant hope when they said stable and which ones didn't. I learned how fast a human life could be itemized into invoices. Alina tried to stay brave, even when her kidneys failed, even when the dialysis left her shaking, even when the doctor stopped saying when and started saying if. I was working every job I could find. During the day, I did maintenance contracts, HVAC repairs, concrete patching, drainage fixes. At night, I quietly consulted under a friend's LLC, reviewing site plans and compliance documents. My civil engineering license was still active, but I didn't advertise it. Engineering didn't pay fast enough when hospitals wanted money now. Mail stacked up at home. Certified letters I didn't open. Notices I assumed were bills. County envelopes I didn't recognize. That's when Brookstone Ridge slid into existence. The land wasn't glamorous, 4 acres of low-lying property adjacent to wetlands. Most people saw mud and mosquitoes. Developers saw something else. A buffer zone. A place where stormwater could disappear quietly. The parcel had belonged to my father. He'd bought it decades ago when the city planned future expansion. When he died, it passed to me clean. No liens, no disputes. But while I was sleeping in hospital chairs, someone filed a quitclaim deed transferring ownership to an HOA that didn't legally exist yet. The signature wasn't mine. The notary stamp was from an office that had been closed for renovations that week. It was sloppy, but it worked. By the time Alina stabilized enough for me to breathe again, the land was gone. I went to the county office once. Just once. The clerk looked tired, overworked. "Sir, this was filed legally," she said without meeting my eyes. "You'd have to contest it in civil court." Civil court meant money. Lawyers. Time. Energy I didn't have. Alina needed dialysis. We needed groceries. I needed to stay employed. So I swallowed it. I told myself I'd come back to it later. Later turned into years. Then last year, I drove past the land and almost didn't recognize it. Where cattails and survey flags used to be, there was asphalt. A parking lot big enough to serve an entire community. Too big. Too fast. I pulled the records. The HOA had applied for a temporary surface use permit, a loophole meant for short-term overflow parking during construction phases. They never closed it. They never upgraded it. They never filed an environmental impact report. And they definitely never received approval for permanent drainage modifications. That meant 2 things. They were either incompetent or hiding something. When Linda threatened to tow my truck, it confirmed the second option. They weren't just protecting parking. They were protecting leverage. I started visiting the surrounding neighborhoods, knocking on doors, listening. A woman 3 blocks down mentioned her tap water smelled metallic after heavy rain. A father said his son's skin broke out in rashes every summer. They all lived downhill. I didn't say anything yet. I just listened. At home, Alina watched me organize papers at the kitchen table. "You're doing that thing again," she said softly. "What thing?" "The quiet one," she replied, "where you don't talk because you're building something in your head." I smiled. "Just looking into a parking issue." She reached for my hand. "Promise me you won't fight them like last time," she said. "Promise you won't burn yourself out." I squeezed back gently. "I'm not fighting," I said. "I'm counting." That night, I pulled the original deed from the safe and laid it next to the forged filing. Parcel descriptions matched. Coordinates aligned. They hadn't even bothered to change the survey reference numbers. Arrogance leaves fingerprints. And then I noticed something that made my chest tighten. The HOA president's name, Linda Whitmore, appeared as a witness on 3 other land transfers in neighboring developments. All of them tied back to Marcus Bell's company. This wasn't a mistake. It was a system. A quiet one. And I had walked into it by accident. I powered up my old laptop, the one I used for consulting work, and started a new folder. I named it simply Brookstone Ridge. Inside it, I created subfolders: deeds, permits, drainage, water flow, payments. I wasn't angry. Anger makes you sloppy. I was focused, because they hadn't just stolen land from me. They'd done it while my wife was fighting for her life. And if they were willing to do that, I needed to know how far they were willing to go. I didn't go back to the parking lot. Not on foot. Not in my truck. Not where anyone could recognize me. Instead, I became something far more dangerous to people like Linda Whitmore and Marcus Bell. I became invisible. Every morning I dropped Alina off for dialysis, kissed her forehead, and told her I'd be close. Then I drove to public places, libraries, diners, hardware store parking lots, anywhere with free Wi-Fi and a clear view of public records. I never logged in from home. I pulled county filings, environmental databases, and state contractor registries. I cross-referenced parcel IDs, permit numbers, inspection dates. What Brookstone Ridge had built wasn't just illegal. It was impossible. Their stormwater runoff calculations were copy-pasted from a different site across town, one with higher elevation and a concrete retention basin. Brookstone Ridge had neither, which meant excess water had to go somewhere. I traced the flow paths digitally first. Then physically, I walked public trails along the wetlands, staying well within access easements. I watched how the water moved after rain. I took photos from public viewpoints. I recorded dates, times, rainfall totals. After the 3rd storm, I saw it. The water near the drainage outlet turned cloudy. Gray. That's not dirt. That's industrial particulate. I collected samples legally from public runoff areas and logged them carefully. I didn't test them myself. That would contaminate the chain. Instead, I sent them anonymously to a certified lab through a third-party environmental nonprofit. The results came back a week later. Heavy metals, petroleum byproducts, concentrations too high for residential runoff. This wasn't parking. This was disposal. I widened the lens. Marcus Bell's development company had ties to 3 other HOAs. All of them had oversized parking areas. All of them bordered low-lying land. All of them had temporary permits that were never closed. The pattern was clean. So was the money. I pulled corporate filings, shell LLCs, consulting fees, maintenance contracts paid by HOAs to Bell-linked entities. They were laundering disposal costs by pushing them onto residential land under the cover of HOA authority. And no one questioned it, because HOAs don't look like industrial polluters. I never confronted anyone. I never asked questions. I watched. I documented. I learned their routines. Unmarked trucks arrived between 1:00 and 3:00 a.m. Security guards rotated weekly, none licensed with the state. Invoices were backdated at the end of each quarter. Then something unexpected happened. I wasn't the only one watching. One afternoon, while photographing a drainage outlet from a public sidewalk, a man approached me. Mid-40s, city uniform, clipboard tucked under his arm. "You work for Bell?" he asked casually. "No," I replied, "just taking photos." He nodded, glancing toward the outlet. "Good," he said quietly, "because someone should." His name was Tom Alvarez, city stormwater inspector, overworked, underfunded, tired of being ignored. He didn't ask for my files. He didn't offer help. He just said one thing before walking away. Whatever they're dumping, it's bigger than this neighborhood. That night, Alina noticed I was quieter than usual. Did you find something bad? She asked. I considered lying. Instead, I told the truth carefully. They're hurting people, I said, and they think no one's looking. She reached for my hand again. Then look, she said, just don't let them see you. I didn't sleep much after that. Because once you see a system like this, once you understand how easily power hides behind paperwork, you realize something else too. They didn't just steal land. They built a trap. And sooner or later, someone was going to get very sick or very loud. I started backing everything up in 3 places. Encrypted drives, cloud storage under aliases, hard copies sealed and dated. I wrote timelines, flow diagrams, compliance violation matrices. By the end of the week, I had something more valuable than anger. I had proof, and proof doesn't shout. It waits, because the moment you reveal it too early, you teach your enemy how to lie better. So I stayed invisible, and let them keep believing I was just another nobody who'd been embarrassed and gone away. They had no idea they were already standing on evidence, and they had no idea how close they were to the edge. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Cream-colored envelope, thick paper, my name printed in a font meant to look official and expensive. Cease and desist. Brookstone Ridge Homeowners Association. Atten Gerald Pike-esque. They accused me of harassment, unauthorized surveillance, and ongoing interference with HOA operations. It was almost impressive how confidently wrong they were. They hadn't sent it because I'd broken any rules. They sent it because someone had noticed the pressure change. I didn't respond. Instead, I attended the next HOA meeting. I didn't announce myself. I didn't sit in the front. I took a folding chair near the back wall and waited while Linda Whitmore ran the room like a talk show host. She smiled too much, controlled the mic too tightly, cut people off mid-sentence. Power always leaks when you watch long enough. When the meeting reached the open comments section, I stood. Not dramatically, just calmly. My name is Daniel Mercer, I said. I have a question about the parking lot. Linda's smile flickered just for half a second. Yes, she said tightly. Can you provide the original drainage approval and environmental impact assessment for the lot? I asked. The permanent one, not the temporary surface use permit. The room went quiet. Gerald Pike leaned toward Linda and whispered something. She laughed nervously. Oh, that's all been handled, she said. We're fully compliant. With which agency? I asked. More silence. Marcus Bell, seated near the wall, finally spoke. This meeting isn't for technical debates, he said. If you have concerns, submit them in writing. I did, I replied evenly, 2 weeks ago. Gerald's eyes narrowed. That was mistake number 2. They thought intimidation was escalation. It was exposure. The following week, the parking lot was suddenly closed for maintenance. Security doubled. Unmarked trucks stopped arriving at night. They were reacting, which meant they were scared. I filed a public information request with the city, narrow, precise, impossible to deny. Drainage approvals. Inspector reports. Communications between the HOA and Marcus Bell's company. At the same time, I sent anonymized data to the State Environmental Compliance Office, just enough to trigger a preliminary review. Not an accusation. A question. Questions are harder to silence. 2 days later, a city inspector showed up at the lot. Then another. Linda emailed the residents claiming it was routine. It was. Tom Alvarez texted me one line. They're scrambling. Then came the escalation. I found my truck with a warning notice taped to the windshield. Unauthorized parking, repeat violations subject to tow. It had been parked legally on a public street. I documented it, photographed it, filed a complaint. The next night, someone followed me home. Didn't hide it. Black sedan, no plates on the front. I drove past my street twice. It stayed with me. I pulled into a police station parking lot. It didn't follow. Fear is a tool when you don't have facts. They still didn't know who they were dealing with. I installed additional cameras at home. Upgraded my backups. Notified Tom quietly. And then I did something small on purpose. I submitted a single, corrected drainage model to the city planning office. No accusation. No commentary. Just math. Within 48 hours, the city issued a notice of potential noncompliance to Brookstone Ridge. Linda lost control at the next meeting. She shouted, threatened fines, blamed outside agitators. Residents started asking questions. Good questions. Marcus Bell stopped attending. That was mistake number 3. Because when powerful people disappear, investigators look closer. Alina watched the news that night, a short segment about possible environmental irregularities in local HOAs. She turned to me. Is that you? She asked quietly. Not yet, I said. She nodded. Then finish it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I was focused. Because the first rule of quiet warfare is simple. You never reveal your full strength in the first encounter. You show just enough to make them panic. And panic makes people with secrets start making mistakes. The state inquiry didn't arrive with sirens or headlines. It arrived as an email. Subject line, request for clarification, stormwater compliance review. That was all it took. Within 48 hours, Brookstone Ridge's maintenance closure turned into a full lockdown. Gates closed. Security guards doubled again, new ones this time, wearing matching uniforms and carrying themselves like they'd been hired for intimidation, not protection. They weren't guarding cars. They were guarding something beneath them. Tom Alvarez met me for coffee 3 mornings later. Neutral location. No phones on the table. You were right, he said quietly, and it's worse than you think. He slid a folder across to me, not official, not stamped. Notes, observations, field sketches. The drainage pipes under the lot didn't just carry runoff. They connected to an undocumented subsurface holding chamber. A crude one. Concrete walls, no liners, no monitoring equipment. A pit. They were storing contaminated waste during the weekend, then flushing it during storms to dilute detection levels. That wasn't just a violation. That was a felony with teeth. Who approved this? I asked. No one, Tom replied. That chamber doesn't exist on paper. I felt my jaw tighten. This wasn't sloppy development anymore. This was intentional harm. Tom hesitated, then added, You're not the first to notice something was wrong, you're just the first with proof. That's when the first ally emerged. Dr. Rachel Kim, environmental toxicologist. She'd been tracking abnormal contamination patterns downstream for months, unexplained spikes, inconsistent with natural runoff. She had data, peer-reviewed, time-stamped, undeniable. She also had patience. We compared notes. My land, their pit, her contamination curves. They lined up perfectly. The illegal operation wasn't limited to Brookstone Ridge. It was the hub. The other HOAs were spokes. Marcus Bell wasn't saving money. He was running a regional disposal network disguised as residential infrastructure. That's when the stakes jumped from civil penalties to prison, and Marcus knew it. 2 days later, I received a settlement offer. No explanation. No admission. Just money. A lot of it. Enough to pay for Alina's treatments for years. Enough to make the problem go away. I didn't respond. The next move came faster. Gerald Pike filed a civil suit against me personally. Harassment, defamation, interference with business operations. They wanted discovery. They wanted to see what I had. I welcomed it. Because discovery works both ways. Meanwhile, the state escalated. The Department of Environmental Protection issued formal inspection notices, unannounced, broad scope. Federal agencies were CC'd. That's when Marcus made his biggest mistake. He tried to bury the pit. Overnight construction. Unpermitted concrete pour. No environmental controls. I captured it legally, drone footage from public airspace, time-stamped, weather logged. You can't hide a felony by committing another one. Linda sent an email to residents blaming outside agitators and warning of temporary inconveniences. Residents didn't buy it anymore. Someone leaked the email to local media. A reporter called me. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because I wasn't building a scandal. I was building a case. Dr. Kim submitted her findings to the state. Tom documented the illegal modifications. I submitted the original deed, mine, along with evidence of forgery. 3 separate investigations converged. Environmental crimes, property fraud, financial laundering, and all of it traced back to the same 3 names. Linda Whitmore, Gerald Pike, Marcus Bell. Elena saw the stress starting to wear on me. You don't have to be the one standing at the front, she said gently. You just have to make sure the truth gets there. She was right. So I stepped back again. Let the agencies move. Let the villains panic. Because power hates silence. And when people like Marcus Bell realize money can't fix something, they start reaching for worse tools. I knew what was coming next. Intimidation. Maybe force. And that's why, before the sun came up the next morning, I moved the most important evidence out of my house. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood something they didn't. This wasn't personal anymore. It was inevitable. And inevitability is the one thing arrogance can't outrun. The first call came at 6:12 a.m. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. No message. The second came 5 minutes later. This time a text followed. You need to stop for your own good. No name. No signature. That told me everything I needed to know. When people with lawyers start sending anonymous threats, it means the lawyers have stopped returning their calls. By noon, Gerald Pike's lawsuit hit my doorstep, hand-delivered, thick, aggressive, designed to overwhelm. They wanted depositions, full financial disclosures, access to my consulting records. They weren't looking for justice. They were fishing for leverage. I responded the only way that makes bullies nervous. I complied. Fully. On my terms. Every document I provided was logged, indexed, and copied to 3 agencies. Every communication went through counsel, a quiet, methodical environmental litigation attorney who didn't grandstand and didn't bluff. Her name was Maya Chen. She read Gerald Pike's filings once, then smiled faintly. They're panicking, she said, and they've overplayed. That afternoon, someone tried to break into my truck. Not smash and grab. Professional. Door handle jimmied. Lock damaged. Nothing taken. They were checking. Testing. I reported it. Documented it. Updated my security logs. Tom Alvarez called that evening. They poured more concrete, he said, tried to cap the chamber. Good, I replied. That locks in the contamination. Dr. Kim sent an update an hour later. Heavy metal levels downstream had spiked again. They were flushing. Desperate. That night, Elena woke up to the sound of me packing a bag. You're not running, she said, not a question. No, I replied, I'm removing risk. I relocated sensitive evidence to council custody, hard drives sealed, chain of custody documented. If anything happened to me, the case would move faster, not slower. That's how you neutralize threats. 2 days later, the intimidation escalated. A black sedan idled across the street from our house for hours. Windows tinted. Engine running. I waved at it. It left. The next move was legal sabotage. Marcus Bell's firm filed an emergency injunction, claiming my actions were causing irreparable economic harm. The judge denied it within hours. Lack of standing. Insufficient evidence. I smiled for the first time in days. Because denial meant something else. Discovery. Subpoenas. They couldn't stop the machine anymore. The state inspection happened at dawn on a Thursday. Unannounced. Full scope. EPA trucks. State vehicles. City inspectors. Linda wasn't there. Marcus was. He tried to charm his way through it. It didn't work. The underground chamber was opened. Samples taken. Photos logged. Seals placed. By afternoon, Brookstone Ridge was officially designated a site of environmental concern. Residents were notified. Water testing kits distributed. Panic spread. Linda finally called me directly. Her voice was thin. "You've made your point," she said. "Let's resolve this quietly." I thought of Elena, of the families downstream, of the land they took while I was praying in a hospital hallway. "No," I said, "you made yours." She hung up. The final threat came that night. A brick through my workshop window. No note. No message. Just glass and noise. I swept it up calmly, because at that point it was over. The district attorney announced a joint task force the next morning. Environmental crimes. Fraud. Racketeering. Media vans parked outside Brookstone Ridge by noon. Elena watched the coverage from the couch, wrapped in a blanket. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. I am now. Because when people abandon law for intimidation, it means the law is already on its way. And the next time we'd all be in the same room. It wouldn't be in an HOA meeting. It would be in public, with cameras, and no place left to hide. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 6:00 p.m. By 5:15, the parking lot was already full. News vans lined the curb. Cameras pointed at the clubhouse doors. Residents stood in clusters, whispering, phones in hand. Brookstone Ridge had never seen this many people gathered for anything that didn't involve free food or complaints about noise. And this time, there would be no hiding behind procedure. I arrived quietly and took a seat near the back just like before. Same folding chairs, same stale carpet, same podium. Different energy. Linda Whitmore stood at the front, hands gripping the edges of the lectern like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her blazer was gone. Her voice, when she spoke, didn't carry. "We're here to address recent concerns," she said, forcing a smile that never reached her eyes. Behind her sat Gerald Pike, jaw clenched, shuffling papers he already knew wouldn't save him. Marcus Bell wasn't there. That absence was loud. Linda began her prepared statement, phrases like temporary irregularities, misunderstandings, ongoing cooperation. Then the doors opened. 3 men and a woman walked in together. EPA, State Environmental Protection, County Prosecutor's Office. The room went dead silent. The lead agent held up a hand. "Please continue," he said. "We're just here to observe." Linda's mouth opened. Nothing came out. That's when the projector turned on. Not hers. Mine. Tom Alvarez stood near the wall, tablet in hand. "With the board's permission," he said calmly, "we'll present the findings." Linda didn't respond. So he did. Satellite images faded onto the screen, timelines of construction, overlaid with permit records. Next came the drainage schematics. Then the subsurface scans. Gasps rippled through the room as the underground holding chamber appeared in stark gray cross-section. Someone whispered, "That's under our kids' parking lot." Dr. Rachel Kim stepped forward. "These contamination spikes," she said, pointing to a graph, "correspond exactly with storm events following industrial waste storage periods. This is not residential runoff." A reporter's camera zoomed in on Linda's face. Her hands were shaking now. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly. This land, I said evenly, holding up a document, was never theirs. I placed the original deed on the table at the front, my name printed clearly. Next to it, a copy of the forged filing. Highlighted, time-stamped. Gerald Pike stood abruptly. This meeting is adjourned. The county prosecutor raised a hand. No, she said, it is. She nodded to an officer. Linda Whitmore, the officer said clearly, you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and environmental endangerment. The room exploded. Phones up. Voices shouting. Someone started crying. Linda froze. Handcuffs clicked closed. Gerald followed moments later. Marcus Bell didn't make it far. He was arrested at his office across town. Footage aired live before the meeting even ended. Outside, residents poured out into the lot as investigators sealed off sections with yellow tape. The underground chamber was marked for excavation. The asphalt that had covered my land, their confidence, their lies, was scheduled to be torn up at first light. I stood off to the side as Elena arrived, supported by a nurse. She took my hand. It's done, she said softly. I nodded. Not relief. Resolution. Because justice isn't loud when it arrives. It's heavy. And it stays. The parking lot didn't disappear overnight. Justice rarely does. First came the fences, tall, steel, unforgiving, sealing off the land like a wound that needed air before it could heal. Then came the signs, State Environmental Remediation Site, no trespassing. Residents watched from their balconies as crews drilled, excavated, and documented every layer of what had been hidden beneath their feet. The underground chamber was worse than expected. Sludge, corroded concrete, evidence bags stacked like bricks. The news stopped calling it a parking issue. They called it what it was: an illegal waste disposal operation run through residential HOAs. Marcus Bell was charged with federal environmental crimes, wire fraud, and racketeering. His company's assets were frozen. His name vanished from development proposals overnight. Gerald Pike lost his law license before the trial even began. Linda Whitmore resigned from the HOA, then watched in disbelief as her resignation was rejected. The state dissolved the board entirely. Civil suits followed. Residents sued. Downstream families sued. The city sued. And I sued too, quietly, precisely, for land theft, fraud, and damages. The settlement restored the property to me. All of it. The land was never paved again. Instead, the state funded full wetland restoration. Native grasses returned. Water levels normalized. Wildlife came back slowly, cautiously. The contamination downstream dropped month by month. Dr. Kim published her findings. Policy changed. Temporary permits were no longer allowed without independent environmental review. Other HOAs across the state tore up questionable lots preemptively. That's how real accountability spreads. Not with speeches. With consequences. Elena's treatment was covered through a combination of settlement funds and a victim compensation program tied to the environmental case. Her health stabilized. She laughed more, slept better, and for the first time in years, we talked about plans that went further than the next appointment. One afternoon, months later, I parked my truck at the edge of the restored land. No signs. No lines. Just grass and wind. A couple walked by and nodded. They knew who I was now. Not because I asked. Because truth travels. I wasn't a hero. I didn't win because I was loud. I won because I paid attention. Because I stayed calm when they wanted chaos. Because I understood that power built on shortcuts always collapses under scrutiny. I knelt down and pressed my hand into the soil. Clean. Where asphalt once hid poison, life had returned. Elena joined me, leaning on my shoulder. They thought you were nothing, she said. They needed me to be, I replied. That night, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I realized something else. The greatest revenge wasn't watching them fall. It was knowing they'd never be able to do it again. Not here. Not anywhere. Because once a system is exposed, it can't pretend anymore. And that's how you take back more than land. You take back the future. If this story made you feel something, don't just watch it, be part of it. Subscribe for real justice stories where power gets exposed and truth always wins. Comment below, would you have stayed silent or fought back like this?